Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for tonight's PRC Saltillo guest webinar, Supporting AAC Users in Schools, Tips, Tricks, and Strategies for Success, with our presenter, Brie Norton. I'm going to go over a few housekeeping things as we get started. First of all, if you should have trouble connecting or hearing in this webinar, the first thing you should do is check your speakers and volume. If you still have trouble, log out and log back in. And if you still have some issues, you can contact Log Me In, because we won't be able to stop and help you during the actual presentation. The training materials are located in the handouts section of the toolbar. You also will get an email after the class that has those forms as well. When you close out of the class, you will have a feedback survey, and we really hope that you will take advantage of that because we really like to see what everybody has, their thoughts, and we kind of tweak our trainings based on the needs. About an hour after the class, you'll get proof of attendance email certificate as well. So if you're not doing ASHA CEUs, but you need to have a certificate for attendance, you can use that. We will address questions at the end as time allows, and we'll have those typed in the chat window. I want to tell you a little bit about ASHA. If you're getting ASHA CEUs, then you have to submit the form within 15 days. And please put the training date on that form. You also have instructions and participation forms in the handouts as well, and they will be emailed in the email that you get after the training in case you don't get those downloaded. Now, do know that you must stay online the entire time to receive ASHA CEUs. GoToWebinar has a timestamp that they use, so they know when you enter and when you exit. So you want to stay on the entire time. And before I introduce Bree, I guess I should tell you who I am. I'm Beth Waite-Lefevre, and I am the PRC Training and Implementation Specialist, and I am your moderator for this evening. So let's talk about Bree. Brie Norton is a speech pathologist, and these are her financial disclosures. She is receiving a speaking fee from PRC Saltillo for presenting for us this evening. Her non-financial disclosures include being a member of ASHA, a member of the Arkansas Speech and Hearing Association, and she is pursuing her LAMP certification through the Center for AAC and Autism. In addition to this, I want you to also know that Bree is a speech-language pathologist who has received her undergraduate degree in early childhood and psychology, and then decided to go on and get a master's in speech. She spent the past 9 years supporting teams, caregivers, private practitioners in working with students with complex communication needs. She does a lot of training, and she has spent a lot of time helping people figure out how to carry over the use of AAC, not only in a therapy situation, but at home and in the classroom. So we feel really fortunate that we have her here this evening. So I'm going to get ready to turn things over to Bree and let her get started.
Hi all, I'm Bree, and I'm super excited to be presenting to you tonight on supporting AAC users in schools, tips, tricks, and strategies. I'm going to turn my webcam off so we can focus on the presentation. Okay, here are our learning objectives for tonight. And I thought I'd start by sharing a little bit about myself. Thank you for the introduction, Beth. I am a speech pathologist that's been practicing for 10 years. The first 5 years of my career, I had a pretty typical caseload for a school-based speech pathologist where I had students with articulation and pragmatic and language needs. I also had some students on my caseload with complex communication needs. However, it was in no way my specialty area, but 5 years ago, I was pulled from that position, and I was given a caseload of 20 students in our district that did have complex communication needs, and they either had a device, and no one really knew how to support them with that device or how to knew much about the communication device. Or I had students on my caseload at that time that had a need for some kind of communication system, but nobody was really problem solving and figuring out what to put in place. So that was my job. And at that time, I really didn't know how to tackle this and what I was doing. So I started reaching out to device representatives, going to webinars like this, going to in-person trainings, reading articles and joining specialty groups, and doing everything I could to learn about how to support these students and provide the best services possible. So now it's 5 years later, and I've learned so much about this. During tonight's presentation, I hope to share with you some of the things that I've found work, along with the hurdles I experienced and the barriers, and some mistakes I made to prevent you from making those same mistakes. Currently in my role, I no longer serve students directly in terms of their IEP minutes, but I provide district-wide support to our 149 AAC users. And what that looks like is I train our in-district teams on how to support our students learning their AAC devices. I also get to coach our teams, including parents, private therapists, teachers, and so on. I'm called in to problem solve quite a bit when we hit a barrier and we're not sure how to move forward. I help my teams troubleshoot technology because we often have technology break or not work properly. My favorite part of my job is getting to collaborate with both our school-based team and private therapists. And I love getting to co-treat with outside therapists. I often co-treat with speech pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and I've learned a lot from co-treating with ABA therapists that students work with privately. And lastly, I coach our teams through conducting AIC evaluations in district. You'll see I have a warning on my slide. I am a quick speaker. I'm from New York, and that's just how I talk, but when I'm passionate about something, I speak even quicker. So I will try to monitor that tonight, but I just wanted to put that out there. So tonight we'll start by talking about the importance of collaboration and why collaborating is so essential. We'll look at training, along with getting the most out of your therapy session. We'll talk about carryover in the classroom and how to improve carryover in the home. And lastly, we'll look at monitoring progress and how to collect meaningful data. So getting everyone on board. When I have a student that transitions to me with an AAC device, or I have a student that our team identifies has AAC needs, this is my step one. This is one of the most essential pieces that we need to have in place if we're going to teach a child how to use a device for true communication. And I know it's a really, really big thing to try to get in place, getting all communication partners on the same page, but it's so necessary. Because one child deserves one voice across all environments. Now that voice might be multimodal. They might have their communication device and also use gesture and sign, and that's wonderful. However, that voice needs to have the same value at school as it does at home and in private therapy. Because if it doesn't, that's totally confusing to the child. And that's what was happening in our district before we really prioritized getting everyone on the same page. We often were trialing some form of AAC with the child at school, and then the parents were doing something totally different, and private therapy was doing something totally different as well. And nobody was seeing the amount of progress they wanted to see. And more importantly, the child was totally confused because communication looked different in every environment. And we want to avoid that. Another reason it's worth investing your time and getting everyone on board is because you really need to create this sense of shared responsibility. That first year, when I had those 20 students on my caseload that I was responsible for problem solving and figuring out communication for, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. Teaching a child communication is a big task, and one person alone cannot do that. However, at that time in my district, as the speech pathologist serving these students, people thought that was my job. They thought I was going to be the one to teach the child how to use their communication device in the 60 or 90 minutes I saw them a week. And that obviously wasn't possible. But once I realized that I needed to invest in creating this thought of shared responsibility across all communication partners, and once we started getting this going, that was the game changer, and we saw change happen. So how do you do this? How do you get everyone on board and create this sense of shared responsibility where all communication partners are invested in teaching a child how to use their communication device? I found there's two key components that you need to have in place. First, you need to create a collaborative atmosphere, and we're going to talk about how to do that. And then you need to make sure you invest time in training those communication partners. So collaboration. When I'm working with a student, I first try to find out who are their communication partners. And I'm usually asking the parent these questions. Do they receive private therapy? Who do they see for private therapy? And then we get consent to be able to talk to those private therapists. And when I ask this question, I'm not just talking about private speech therapists. I'm also talking about ABA therapists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, because they're all communication partners. And I can take all of them and get them on the same page and use them for more modeling and immersion of the device. Also, I want to find out, do they spend a lot of time with mom or dad or grandma? Because we need those communication partners as well, those family members trained on the communication device, so they can support that child in learning how to use it. So we do have a consent form in our district that we get signed so we can reach out to private therapists and all get on the same page. And a lot of our collaboration is done through email, but we also try to plan some in-person collaboration and meetings and trainings. Here you see I have planned training, which is so important. When we decide we want to trial AAC with a child in our district and we're going to be sending a trial communication system home, parents are required to come in and get trained on that device. Also, I'll reach out to private therapists and make sure they're familiar with the device and the system. And if they're not, I offer to go out there and either co-treat during a session or go at a different time to teach them about that device. Training our ABA therapists had been so valuable. Prior, they hadn't known about some of the systems we were implementing, but a lot of our students go to ABA therapy and get ABA therapy for about 25 hours or up to 25 hours a week. So getting those therapists trained has really benefited us. And I'm going to talk to you in a minute about what that training looks like. But although training all communication partners can seem like a really big task, it's totally worth it. And it's an investment you want to make, and we'll discuss that. Another thing that's really important when you're trying to get collaboration and get everybody on board is making sure you're facilitating frequent, honest conversation about not only what's working with the device, but what's not working. I find that a lot of times when we're getting this team of communication partners together, they often think as the speech pathologists, we're supposed to be a cheerleader for the device, and we only want to hear what's working. But if you create that kind of mentality, what's going to happen is when your team hits a barrier, the parents hit a barrier or the ABA therapist hits a barrier, they're going to decide they're not going to want to use the device anymore because they're not going to think they can tell you what's not working. So when I train my teams and I'm creating this collaborative atmosphere, I always let them know that I want them to be brutally honest with me, not only about what's working with the system, but what's not working so we can problem solve it together. If I don't do this, something else I found happens sometimes, which is really sad, is that people will talk poorly about the device in front of the child, and our kids are smart. If they hear others talk poorly about it, they're not going to want to use it. So making sure you put it out there that you want all your team members to have honest conversations with you, come to you not just with what's going great, but also let you know what's not working is so important. Making sure everyone knows their value is also something you're going to have to focus on to create this collaborative atmosphere. Far too often I hear, oh, I'm just a parent or I'm just a paraprofessional. And I never want that mentality when teaching a child a communication device. A parent and a paraprofessional are two of the most valuable people in this, in that they spend the most time with the children. And they are two of the most valuable communication partners. So I always let them know that we're equally in this together. Although I might be leading the team and helping with some of the programming and the more involved stuff, we are all have that sense of shared responsibility and need to tackle this as a team where we have equal value. Along with that goes making sure that the student's vocabulary is appropriate across all environments. Obviously, when we select a communication device, we want to make sure that it's appropriate for the student, but it also needs to appropriately support all the communication partners' goals. So when I select a vocabulary and our team comes together and decides what vocabulary we're going to trial with a student, we make sure it will meet the needs of that child along with the educational setting and so on. Where I've often had experienced this as a barrier was when collaborating with ABA therapists. Sometimes when we were working with emergent communicators, our team would feel that maybe LAMP one hit was the most appropriate vocabulary system for a child. And if you're familiar with LAMP, I'm going to jump over so you can see, a lot of the target words on LAMP one hit are more of your core words. And typically with our emergent communicators that are receiving ABA therapy, the targets for them in ABA therapy are more fringe vocabulary so that ABA therapists can work on manding. So maybe a target might be the word ball or cookie. And if I decide and our team decides we're starting a child on LAMP one hit, these are the words that can be addressed. Now, that won't work for the ABA therapist. And if I'm creating an atmosphere of we're all in this together, you have equal value and your input matters, I need to make sure this works in that atmosphere because I also want them using the system and carrying it over. So what I've done in that situation is you can do specific programming to a vocabulary system like LAMP one hit, and you could make it an open pathways to certain target words. So although like would only be one hit and work might only be one hit, I'd make it so play opens up and all of this is hidden, but under toys, you still have the word ball, even though everything else is hidden. So in showing the ABA therapists I value them and I value their targets that they think are most appropriate for this child, I will modify vocabulary systems to make sure they work for everybody. If you want to learn more about how to do that, that is more advanced programming, but you can reach out to your device representative, or PRC has a YouTube channel, most device companies do, where you can look stuff like that up to learn how to do that more advanced programming. Okay, so with creating this collaboration, it's really important that your team members understand the vocabulary system, because AAC devices can be scary, and if our communication partners don't understand that device, they might talk poorly about it, and we don't want that happening. So our goal in training communication partners is to empower them. I am not trying to create master programmers. I'm just trying to empower them so they feel confident using the system, and they also know of some strategies in supporting the AAC user. So I do intentionally train all communication partners and make sure they know what they need to do. And although this seems like a huge investment, like I said, it's the way you're going to get the most change, because you're not going to be able to teach a communication device in just 60 or 90 minutes a week, or even just during the school day. In order to teach a communication device, the child needs to understand its value across all environments, and they need to have that one voice. When I train communication partners, we talk about the vocabulary system, and we learn how to navigate it and play with it a bit. And then we talk about evidence-based ways to support an AAC user. Initially, when I started training teams, I went a little overboard because I was super excited about teaching them about the systems we were working with. And by the end of my training, their eyes were rolling in the back of their heads. So now I know it's super important to keep my training simple and not go too complicated. I really just need to, like I said, empower them so they're ready to tackle this. And then once I do that initial training, I can do follow-up training and coaching from there. But keep your initial training simple. Learn from my mistakes. So what does that look like? Now, remember, AAC devices can be scary, so you really need to get your communication partners touching the AAC device and navigating it so they realize they're not going to break it. It's okay to touch it. They figure out how to say words and activate it. So first, I focus on the organization of the system, and I put a device in front of them, and we learn to navigate it, and we talk about how it's organized. Is it organized by having a core page and then categories? Or is it organized by motor planning? If the system's organized not categorically by motor planning, but by motor planning, it's super important you explain that to your communication partners, or else they're going to be lost. So we usually spend about 15 or 20 minutes looking at the organization of the system and learning how to find words and navigate it. If you don't feel comfortable training on the device and the organization of it, reach out to your device representatives. My first year working with these students and these devices, they were my go-to, and it was just so valuable to have them as resources. You can go to most device companies' web pages and look up your region and find out who your representative is. And then when they're in their area, they can come to you and teach you about their devices. So definitely use that resource. I know I did. Another great resource to learn more about devices is YouTube. Like I said, most device companies have YouTube channels where they have videos on programming and doing different things on their devices, along with some information about their vocabulary system. So after we talk about organization, I always show my team members how to word find. Word finding is such an important thing because our communication partners are going to have to be modeling words on the device, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. When you're word finding in your Saltillo products, your word finder is usually behind ABC 123. Here you see I'm mimicking Word Power 60 Basic, and behind ABC 123, you have a find word where you can look up words in this device. And this is most of Saltillo's devices, it's behind ABC 123. In LAMP Words for Life, your word finder, or LAMP on an accent, your word finder is going to be behind spell number, and you have a word finder. And then when you're in Unity products on an accent, your word finder is typically behind pages. If you're working with a different kind of device and I didn't show you where that word finder is, or if that tutorial was too quick, I included some videos of where word finder is in the different vocabulary systems, or you could always Google it or go to YouTube. There's tons of resources out there, but it's essential that you show your communication partners how to word find on the different devices. After we talk about the vocabulary system, I then teach my team members how to support an AAC user, and I give them a couple jobs. But before I go into that, I just want to give you some background on how my district runs AAC trials. So we have some students transition to us with devices, and I tackle training the same way that I'm speaking to you about it now. If we're deciding that we want to try an AAC system with a child, what we're able to do in our district is typically we can provide them an iPad with software that mimics the vocabulary system we're thinking might work for them. So if we thought maybe they'd benefit from an accent device with LAMP, we might give them an iPad with LAMP Words for Life to be able to trial it a little bit. Or if we're thinking maybe we're going to go the route of a Nova Chat with Word Power, we'd give them an iPad with Touch Chat to be able to trial it until we're ready to do our AAC evaluation. That iPad is assigned to them. Parents sign a mobile device agreement, and it goes across all environments. And once again, like I said, parents are required to come in for training to learn about that vocabulary system and how to support their child before the device can go home. In that training, we emphasize that that device can only be used for communication. We don't want that beginner AAC user using that device for anything else because they're learning that it has power to communicate. And to do this, we also use guided access, which is a tool you can use on iPads and iPhones, and we use it to make our iPad a talker. And what guided access allows you to do is it allows you to lock a child in an app. So we lock them in the communication app, and we call our iPad a talker. And our parents and all our communication partners are on the same page that that's all that iPad will be used for. My presentation comes in handout form as well. It's one of your links, and the link to guided access, if you're not familiar with it, will be on that presentation. Also, when our communication partners come in for training and when we're collaborating with them, I intentionally make sure everyone understands the why behind us trialing AAC. It's typically pretty understood for our students with very limited communication. Everyone understands why a child with limited communication, we might be trialing some form of AAC. But I've come across that sometimes when I'm working with a child that is verbal, but very unintelligible or hard to understand, and we're using AAC as a backup system, if I don't intentionally explain that to my communication partners, they don't understand why we're not just using verbal language. But when they understand this device is a backup to their verbal language for when they're not understood, then they're on board. And I need my communication partners on board so they're had that sense of shared responsibility. I also find that sometimes when I'm working with students with autism that we're trialing AAC, and although they're verbal, they have limited functions of language, and our purpose is to expand the functions of language. Sometimes if I don't intentionally explain that why to my communication partners, they're not as on board. But once I do, they get it. So just make sure, that's one of the mistakes I made early on, is I assumed everyone understood the why, and they didn't, and so they weren't as invested. So now I make sure we're all on the same page with that too. Okay, so once we talk about the vocabulary system and how to word find, I then tell my communication partners that they have 3 jobs. That's it. There's just 3 things I need them to do to support this child learning this device. And job number 1 is simple. It's an expectation. It's that when I see that child, I want to see their device. Now, I don't care if they're using the device. I just want to see that the device is with them. It's not in their backpack. It's not across the room. It's with them. And I use the catchphrase, you see me, you see my AAC. And that doesn't seem too scary. Once I say they don't have to be using it, it just needs to be with them. They need to know it has value. So that's job number 1. Once again, I told you that a lot of times we're using iPads. In order to make iPads easier to carry around, we provide our AAC users with a chat bag. It's just a carrying strap that we use that we found works for our kids. Our kids are really tough on carrying systems, and we've used a lot of things that break very easily. So chat bags have been a more durable system that we're able to give our kids. So job number 1, see me, see my AAC. That's simple enough. So I haven't scared off my communication partners yet. Then job number 2 is just to model. The fancy term is aided language stimulation, but I don't tell them that. I just tell them they have to model. And then we talk about typical language development. For the first year of life for a baby, we talk to them and we talk to them and we talk to them without any expectation of them speaking. 4 weeks into talking to them, we're not like, this isn't working. We know it's going to take a full year of language immersion before they speak, and we're okay with that. But what happens with a device user is often we give them a device, and we talk to them, and we talk to them, and we talk to them, and then 4 weeks later I hear, this isn't working, they're not using it. Well, when we look at language input and output, we gave them this foreign instrument, and we continued to talk to them, but we never used the device and showed them that this could be used for communication. I love this picture here, comparing it to a piano. It would be like me handing you a piano and telling you to play me a song without ever modeling or teaching you how to do that. And I use that comparison when I talk about this to my communication partners. If we want our students to use the device, we need to use it. And that's what modeling is. Just like we model language to a typical baby learning language, we need to model language on devices to our communication partners, to our children. So we're looking at input and output. So our input needs to be spoken language still, because our kids might learn to speak along with the device. And their output could be spoken language or the device. So what that looks like is I might say, oh, I like how you're sitting. Are you ready to play? And I'm still talking to my kids in sentences, but I'm modeling how this device can be used for communication. And I'm also showing them where words are in their communication device. So modeling is just so, so powerful. And when I give that information to my communication partners, I also tell them this statistic. I let them know why them modeling is so important, and telling them that if a child just gets, an AAC user gets 40 to 60 minutes of modeling on their device a week, which is a typical speech language therapy session, right? That's the amount of speech therapy they're getting. It would take them 84 years to get the amount of language exposure as an 18-month-old baby. That's why I can't teach this device by myself. We all need to be on the same page, and we all need to have this sense of shared responsibility, because teaching AAC is hard and it's time consuming, and we need to immerse this child in their device. So we all need to be modeling. And giving this statistic, I'm so grateful for it, has been a game changer, because I see everybody's eyes widen and they get it, and they get why I'm asking them to model. So job number 1, see me, see my AAC. Not too scary. Job number 2, model. Also very doable. Job number 3, I call cast back. And all that means is that we are going to accept all forms of communication from this child, because last week, before this device entered their life, that worked. And what we're going to do is we're going to show them how to say it on their device. Our kids are smart. If communication devices make their life harder, they're going to hate them. So we don't want this device entering their life to make their life harder. But instead, we want to show them how to use the device. So what this looks like is I'm going to jump into LAMP, Words for Life, and this is LAMP full. If I was casting back a child communicating to me, and let's say last week they gesture for a cookie, and that would get them a cookie, and now their device is in front of them, and they gesture for a cookie, I'm still going to accept that gesture, because I don't want them to think this device is going to make their life harder. And I might say, oh, you want a cookie? Or I might cast back and say, oh, you want a cookie? And I'm just showing them how to use this device to communicate what they were communicating with that gesture, because the device might be more effective. And I'm going to give them that opportunity to be immersed in that and see that. If a child is communicating through behavior, behavior is communication, I'm going to honor that and cast back on their device. So if one of my students throws their work, are they communicating? Yeah, they're communicating. Is it effective? I hope not. Is it appropriate? Definitely not. So I'm going to cast back what they're communicating with their behavior. And I might say, listen, if you want to stop, you can tell me stop, but we're not going to throw our work. And the first time they appropriately say stop instead of throwing their work, you better believe I'm going to back off of demands, because they're communicating more appropriately. I also cast back for my verbal students we're working with that we're trying to teach different functions of language. So if one of my students scripts, I want cookie, and they have that down requesting, I might up their vocabulary game by casting back and say, oh, you must be hungry. And I'm casting back. So casting back is such a powerful tool that I use a lot. So those are those 3 jobs. And I always give my teams an 80-20 rule. I tell them to think about typical language development. When we teach a baby language, most of the teaching is on us. We don't put tons of demands on them. We just immerse them in that language for a full year of life. So teaching a child an AAC device should be no different. So my 80-20 rule is that 80% of the time, we should be modeling and casting back. And then 20% of the time, we should be creating opportunities where our students want to communicate. So what does that look like? Well, we're going to talk about that and getting the most out of your therapy session. First, we need to get our minds wrapped around that when we're teaching an AAC device, we're teaching communication, not compliance. I know as a speech pathologist, some of my goals are more compliance-based. You know, we always have those following direction goals and things like that. But when I'm teaching a device, I need to focus on teaching true communication. I was doing this completely wrong that first year. When I had those 20 kids on my caseload, I typically would pull them out of their classroom and bring them to my speech room. We'd work on learning how to use their device. And I would do a lot of drill-based tasks. And we used a token economy typically, and as we did our drill-based tasks, they'd earn tokens, and then they'd get to where they were going to get their reinforcer, and they typically request it on their device. And my students were little rock stars. They used those devices beautifully in my speech therapy session. But the second they left my room, they didn't touch their device, and I didn't know what was going wrong. So then I was like, oh, I need to teach them to generalize to the classroom. So I started pushing into the classroom, and I ran the same kind of speech session in the classroom. And still, I never saw them go to that device for communication. And that's when I realized it's because I taught them that that device needed to be used for compliance-based tasks. But I never taught them how to use their device for true communication in authentic opportunities. So I started changing what I did, and I started pushing into their natural environments. I would go to recess, and when a real opportunity came up to ask for swing, that's when we talk about it. Or maybe a big truck went by. That's when we talk about it. I'd go to recess with them. I'd be in the classroom with them during real opportunities that happen naturally in their schedule. And I'd also create some opportunities for them to want to communicate while in their natural environment. But I stopped taking them into my speech room. Generalizing is hard for our students. So giving them one more thing to generalize is just not worth it. So when we're teaching communication, why not go to where they're already communicating? I also realized that learning to communicate should be fun. When you and I communicate, it's usually because we need to or because we have something we're excited about or want to say. When a baby is learning to communicate, it's because they have something to say. They say mama and they get a reaction and that was fun, so they say it again. Or they say milk and they get milk and they learn, okay, that was good. I have some power over my environment. So communicating for our AAC users should also be fun and engaging. Whenever I have a child that transitions to me or that we're going to trial AAC with, I always send a reinforcement assessment home. I do this for my behavior students as well. Because if I know what you love, I can get you talking. Now, sometimes I send a reinforcement assessment home and I don't get it back, but more often I do receive it back. And parents know so much more about their kids, so I like finding out what they know they love. But if you send a reinforcement assessment home and you don't get it back, you can do your own reinforcement assessment by putting some toys in front of them and seeing what the child prefers and putting some things in front of them and seeing what they like. But reinforcement assessments are a game changer when teaching AAC. Once again, if you Google reinforcement assessments, tons will come up. You can figure which one you like, or you can tweak it to make it work for you. But at the beginning of the school year, I always tell my teams, send that reinforcement assessment home. And when I'm brought in to problem solve a child, I always ask where that assessment is, because that's how I'm going to get you talking. Virtual reality applications are another great tool to make communication fun. In my references, you'll see I cite Lauren Enders. If you don't know of her, she's incredible. If you ever get to see her present, she's really engaging to listen to, and she has a lot of great tools to use to make communicating fun. One of her things she talks quite about is applications and virtual reality applications. At the bottom of the screen, you see some photo filters I used, and Through photo filters, you can talk about so much. Students can tell you if they want to be an animal or a superhero, if they want to look funny or sad, if they want to be a rabbit or a puppy, if they want you to be a character or her to be a character. There's so many different parts of speech and things you can work on through photo filters, and kids want to communicate it. You don't have to be prompting them fully because they have something to say. So take advantage of those virtual reality applications. Do Not Touch by Nickelodeon is also really cool. It lets you manipulate your environment. You show the camera to the environment, and then a button comes up, the kid presses it, and something happens, like birds fly out or something. And it's a great way to get your kids talking. If you're still struggling to find ideas about how to teach certain target words or make teaching an AAC device more natural or engaging, AAC Language Lab has great resources for both PRC and Saltillo. It's only $19.95 annually. I know it's well worth the investment for me. I use it all the time, and it saves me time in making materials. So check that out. There's also some free resources on that website as well. Something else I've learned when teaching students how to use their AAC device for true communication and not compliance is that I need to be more willing to go with the flow and follow the child's lead. I am type A, everybody. I am a planner, and I like to know what's going to happen in my therapy session. I like to plan the activity we're going to do in advance. But when teaching communication, you can't always do this. The most powerful sessions I have is when I bring in a bunch of toys or different things, and the child gets to pick what we're going to look at, and then we can naturally talk about it. So often, I don't know where my therapy sessions are going to go. Another example is that I had one little girl who I knew loved Play-Doh, and we often would build with Play-Doh, and we'd talk about what we built. And I planned this really awesome lesson, or I thought it was awesome, where we were going to make Play-Doh, and I was so excited about it. But when I pushed into the classroom, the little girl I was going to work with was at the window looking outside at a thunderstorm. And I invited her over to make Play-Doh with me, and she had no interest. So I had to abandon my Play-Doh activity for the day, and instead I went to the window with her, and we had the most awesome session talking about the thunderstorm. And I was modeling words and casting back, and then she was excited about the vocabulary we were talking about, so she was communicating, and that all happened because I followed her lead, and I was willing to just do what she wanted to do so we could have authentic communication. So think about that and be willing to follow the child's lead, even though so often we want to plan our sessions in advance. So along with communicative temptations and giving kids reasons to communicate, you also want to remember to model and cast back, so don't forget that 80-20 rule. The programs I've been jumping back and forth between are here on your handout and in my presentation. The one that mimics PRC devices on your computer is called Pass New Voice, and that's going to mimic your LAMP. It will also mimic your Unity and everything like that. And then Saltillo products you can mimic on your computer using Chat Editor. And through these programs, you can also make visual supports. I often make visual supports when we're working on certain target words, or if I want to send words home to mom that we've been working on. So that little girl during that thunderstorm, I was using Pass New Voice to write with icons. I'm going to show you how that works to make visual supports. And then I sent home those visual supports to mom and dad so they could see what we spoke about during our session. So I'll show that to you. Also, in my handouts is a guide to Pass New Voice, so you can learn how to use the tool I'm using right now, which is called Write with Icons. And in my handouts is also a tutorial on using Chat Editor to make visual supports as well, because I'm going to do this pretty quickly. So in Pass New Voice, in order to write with icons, no matter what vocabulary system you're in, you are going to go to Vocabulary, Vocabulary Display Options, and Write with Icons. And this software is free, so it's definitely something you should get on your computer. And I'm going to OK through. So now, as that little girl and I are talking about the thunderstorm, I can type words that are coming up: thunder, cloud, rain. And I type and press enter, and the path to say that word is there. So it could be a visual support for her in order for her to say the word if she wants to follow that path. Or a lot of times it's a cheat for me when I'm working with more advanced users and I don't want to word find every word that's coming up in our conversation. I will use Pass New Voice Write with Icons as a cheat for myself. to figure out where words are so I could quickly model them in the device. And then I can just copy and paste to Word or whatever tool I want and send the words we addressed in our therapy session home to mom so she can review them with the child, or to outside therapy. This tool can just be used endlessly. I also use it to create classroom labels, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But this is right with icons. I've seen people use it to highlight words in books they're reading, or vocabulary words being targeted in the classroom, and so on. In Chat Editor, the tool works a little differently. It's called capture mode. So whatever vocabulary you're in on a Saltillo product. So I'm in Chat Editor to make the vocabulary support. It's called capture mode. And when I go into capture mode, whatever I touch will go into this bar here. So let's say I wanted to capture eat cookie. It's captured in my bar here, and then I can copy to my clipboard and create that visual sequence and print it to support that user. So that's also a great tool to make visual supports in Chat Editor for your Saltillo kiddos. Okay. In addition to making visual supports to help my students, some other teaching tools I use is masking or hiding. Now, I am not going to show you exactly how to do this. I'm going to highlight it real quick in one of the vocabulary systems, but I don't have the directions here. I just want you to know that it's a possibility to do this kind of thing on whatever device you're working with your child. So if masking or using hide mode is something you're interested in, you can look it up on YouTube or Google to figure out how to do it in the vocabulary system you're in. I just want you to be aware of masking and using visual prompts as teaching tools in your therapy session to make your child more successful. So what I'm talking about in your PRC products, masking or hiding is called Vocabulary Builder. And you can turn Vocabulary Builder on or off, and you can set it up. So I've set my Vocabulary Builder up for that little girl with the thunderstorm. And we were working on some target words during that thunderstorm, and I wanted her to learn where those words are. So I set my Vocabulary Builder up ahead of time. And when I turn it on, now all the other words are hidden, and she has access to the words that we're using, and she can learn them errorlessly. So I can turn that on so we can have a conversation about we can use some of these words errorlessly during our conversation, and then once she learns these, I can go back in and turn Vocabulary Builder off. So in any PRC device, you can use Vocabulary Builder as a teaching tool to teach certain target vocabulary words to your students. Once again, just look up Vocabulary Builder on the internet along with the device you're working with, and it will show you how to do that, or check out their YouTube channel for that. In Saltillo products, it's called hide mode, and you can go into edit mode and then hide mode, and you can hide all your icons and then decide which icons you want to reveal. And then when I leave hide mode and edit mode, those are the icons you can see. So once again, this is a teaching strategy I use quite a bit with some of my students that need it. Just know that it exists, and it's something that can make your therapy more effective if you need to use it. So I'm going to go back to edit mode, hide mode, and I'm going to show all to give the child access again. Another strategy I use when working with students sometimes is using visual prompts. If I have a target word that we're working on and the child's struggling to get it, but they don't need Vocabulary Builder per se, I can make that button a certain color so it stands out. I have one student right now that his goal is to ask for a break, and he's having a hard time remembering where that break icon is. And he's using Lamp Words for Life Full. So we used color coding to help him. And what we did was we were able to change the color of the button. So in Lamp Words for Life, the path to work leads to break. So we made this red so it would stand out to him. And then in here, we changed this to red as well, and we changed this to red. So the path to break really stood out to him. Color coding and changing background color can be done no matter what device you're using. So if that's a strategy that you think would benefit your student, check it out. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about carryover in the classroom and how to get your teachers on board. And my first suggestion to you is make sure you invest the time in creating a relationship with your teacher and your paraprofessionals, because that's going to be what's most important to get them on board and get them listening to you. I I am one that really wants to get stuff done. And when I went into a coaching position where I was district-wide, I had a relationship with some teachers and I didn't have a relationship with others. And I quickly noticed those teachers I had a relationship with were way more willing to listen to me. So my advice to you is you can't move the furniture until you're invited in. So in the beginning of the year, form those relationships and get invited into the classrooms. Learn your teacher's teaching style. Learn what they prioritize. Learn how to support them and show them that you're willing to work with them and help them. And once you form that relationship, you'll be able to get better carryover. And I formed that relationship with both my teachers and my paraprofessionals. Then invest that time in training. You need to empower your teachers and your paras so they're not scared of that device and they know how to support that child in using their AAC tool. I also push in for therapy sessions. In addition to helping my students with generalization, it also allows me to coach my communication partners. So whether I'm directly coaching or they're just watching me, they're seeing how I interact with the child, how I use that device, how I'm modeling and casting back, and they're learning how to be a better communication partner. I also sometimes get to directly coach them as they work with the child, which is really, really powerful. So pushing in for therapy sessions helps get better carryover, definitely. In my district, we also intentionally provide as many tools to support modeling and immersion as we can. If we have a child with a dedicated device or using an iPad with communication software, we're able to provide a secondary iPad to that classroom so teachers and paras and peers can get familiar with the communication program as well. And that's been great for modeling along with word finding and everything like that. But if you don't have that kind of technology available, don't stress. There's low-tech boards for all communication devices. So go print a low-tech board here at AAC Language Lab. Through the free resources, there's low-tech boards for your PRC and Saltillo products. You can print them and get them in the hands of your teachers, paras, and peers and create this immersive environment and get people comfortable with the vocabulary system. Also, those two programs that I've been using, the chat editor and Past New Voice, can be projected to smart boards. So we download it in our teachers' computers. Both softwares are free, and we project them to our smart boards. And now we have an immersive environment for all our kids, where during morning meeting, everybody's going to the board and saying, what day of the week it is on Lamp Words for Life or on Word Power. Whatever software we're using, we try to mimic it on the smart board so we can capitalize on teachers modeling for all along with peer models because kids learn from kids. So know that's a possibility. That's been a game changer for us. Past New Voice will only talk for 90 days, but that's okay. After the 90 days, we use our voice. Chat editor won't speak until you connect an actual dedicated device to it, and then it will speak forever. But once again, if it's not talking, that's okay. We'll use our voice, and we're just trying to immerse the child in where these words are and show them we're all in this together. Classroom labels is a really powerful tool. At first, I thought I was creating classroom labels using those Past New Voice Write with icons and chat editor capture. I thought I was creating classroom labels to benefit my students using AAC, and I was, but I found it's even better for my communication partners. So if I go to that tool where I can write with icons, we'll do that one, and I label the door and where the crayons are and a cup is, I'm immersing my communication partners and my student in where this vocabulary is in this device. And once again, we're just creating stronger communication partners and our child is getting more exposure to their target words, which is really, really powerful. So create classroom labels. It's definitely worth it. Something else that I've found gets better carryover in the classroom is when I select certain target words. These devices are really robust, which is awesome, but people are scared of them and they don't know where to start. So even though I only give them 3 jobs, when I leave them, they're often like, okay, but what words do I model? And I often would tell them any words, but they wanted to know specific words. So we started together creating a couple target words or coming up with target words, and we'd give teams, 3 to 6 words that were the target words for that student. And this was just kind of trying to give them a piece to the puzzle so they'd feel empowered and they'd start modeling these target words. And then once they were comfortable modeling these target words, we'd give them more words. And then they'd start going off on their own because they were exploring the device and comfortable with it. But to get communication partners comfortable and classrooms comfortable with where to start, I find that selecting target words is really beneficial. And we're going to look at a form for that in a minute. Something else that has been a game changer for me is a generalization board. I worked with one classroom teacher who had a lot going on in her classroom, and at the end of my speech therapy session, when I tried to debrief her on what we worked on and what she could do to help me generalize skills, she wasn't able to listen to me. She had too much going on, and I could tell it just overwhelmed her. So I tried sending her emails to tell her what we worked on and what she could do, but by the time she read her email, it was the following week and we were working on something different. So what I've learned to do is I ask for a small part of the whiteboard or the chalkboard, or I bring in my own whiteboard, and I write the students' initials, each of my kids' initials on that board. And then I write briefly just one or two things that classroom can do to help me carry over the skills we're working on. And that has been awesome. It's a great visual reminder. My teachers love it. Paras love it. So a generalization board, however you can make it work, is a great, great thing to have. And lastly, we really try to use peer models as much as possible by projecting to the smart boards, by getting peers low-tech boards. Using peers is a game changer because kids learn from kids. So Johnny might not want to use the device when he sees me using it, but when he sees his friend Sarah using it, you better believe he's going to want to use his communication device. Dr. Musselwhite has a lot of work on communication circles, and that's about getting peers competent and learning how to be peer models. It starts with an adult teaching peers, and then the adult can kind of phase themselves out, and we have peers teaching peers how to use AAC. So check out her work on communication circles. It's mentioned in my references. Something else we use in my district is Device User of the Week, where we use that secondary iPad to assign it to another student that might be a verbal student, but they get to use that device to answer questions during morning meeting or during certain times of the day, and we're building peer models. We're also building a culture of AAC where our kids learn how you need to be patient when talking to someone that uses AAC, how it takes a little longer to create a message, and so forth. So Device User of the Week has been a great thing that we've implemented in some of our classrooms. Now we're going to talk about carryover in the home and how to improve carryover in the home. And I'm going to be honest with you and tell you that this was one of the things I struggled with most when I started working with my students using devices, because the home is typically the last place I see a device getting carried over. And at first I was frustrated with this, but now I get it. Typically, a family is able to communicate with their child, whatever that looks like. Families have a love language, and I've learned to really value that and appreciate it. Parents can communicate with their kids, and if you watch them, it's the most fascinating thing ever because the tiniest little facial expression means something. So now I respect a family's love language, and when I talk to them and I train them, I tell them that I'm going to help them figure out how to integrate this AAC device into their home in a realistic manner. So once again, parents are required to come in for training on the device if we're going to initiate a trial. If a child has a device, I always reach out to the family and ask them if they're comfortable with the device or if they'd like some additional training. And during that, I help the family figure out a realistic plan to integrate that device at home. I often tell them, I know they have a crazy schedule because I don't want them to feel guilty. Parents want to do what's best for their kids. And if they feel like they're not using the device enough, they're going to feel guilty and they're going to internally hate that device. But if I let them know it's okay, let's figure out what works for you. Maybe Friday night, you know that you don't have cheerleading practice with your other child and baseball and all that stuff. And Friday night you're home at a relatively decent time and you're going to read a book. When you read that book, you use the device to model target vocabulary. Or maybe, Thursday night before baseball practice, you go out to a restaurant. Everybody order on the child's device what they're gonna want to eat. Ask the child if you can use their device, and mom and dad and brother and sister order food on that device and let the child see you using that device for true communication. Another thing I've done is that we send our target words home to the parent so they also aren't overwhelmed with where to start, but they know what words we're modeling as much as possible and they're on the same page. I always determine a plan for my family members to communicate programming needs because although these devices are pretty robust, they don't always have all the words that child needs. So I'll ask parents to just jot those words down or email me a list and we'll get them programmed. Eventually, I do teach parents how to program, but that's not in my initial training and that's not until they're ready. And also, I always emphasize to family members that they are so valuable in this whole process. And I let them know that by them being part of our conversation and our collaboration. So they're included in collaboration emails. And as we go on with the trial with what's working and what's not working, or as we're problem solving a communication system or teaching a child a device, the parents are part of that conversation. I suggest Facebook to a lot of my families. I tell them to join Facebook, join that vocabulary system, learn about it so that they can see what's working for other families, what's not working, and they're just part of an environment that supports their child learning that device. And Facebook can be a great resource for that. So now we're going to talk about monitoring progress. And monitoring progress for AAC can be challenging. I feel like sometimes I think I write awesome IEP goals, but at the end of the year, I know my child's made so much progress, but the percentage for that IEP goal really doesn't show the amount of progress they made. So these are some tips and strategies that we use in my district to really show progress and has helped us get more meaningful data. So the first thing is I've talked to you about selecting target words. We do this as a team. We usually select those 4 to 6 target words to start with. There's a lot of different lists out there for target words, and I usually try to go with some kind of list that's ranks words in terms of importance so that I have a reason for picking the words we're picking. And we typically pick a couple core words along with a couple fringe words that are important to the child. So we select our target words, and then we use this classroom data collection sheet, which is part of your handouts. And this sheet goes in the classroom. At the top, we put 3 to 6 words. So here you see our target words are go, want, and ball. And then on the column on the left-hand side where it says date, we ask classroom staff at the end of every day, so not child by child, but at the end of every day, to circle where the child was with that word. So as a speech pathologist, I'm learning how my kids are doing, generalizing the skills I'm working on, but I'm also holding my communication partners accountable for modeling, because if I see there's a week that this form wasn't filled out, I can ask about it. So it's a great way to remind your communication partners to be modeling, to hold classrooms accountable, to let them know of those target words. And you might put those target words up there and also use write with icons or capture to show them where those words are. So here you can see go. At the end of the day, M is circled, so that means that word was modeled all day long, but the child never activated it. Under want, you see P, meaning that following some kind of prompt, the child activated want. And in comments, if the team wanted to, they could specify. And ball, under ball, you see S, meaning the child spontaneously activated ball. Now, I don't know if they spontaneously activated it 3 times or if they started with a model and then a prompt and then they got spontaneous, but the team can decide how they want to work, if they want to write that down in comments or they just want to talk about that. But the goal of this is really to focus my team members in on what words we're modeling and hold my team members accountable, and it gives me some information as to if words are moving to spontaneous. This is a sheet that I keep as a speech pathologist that lets me monitor the target words the child is learning. So we put the target words here, we put the date we introduced them, and the date acquired. And both of these forms are in the handouts. So typically I keep a form like this along with the speech therapist, and at the annual review meeting, I can go in and say, no, maybe your child didn't master their objective, but look at all the words they learned this year. Or maybe they did master their objective, and I can also share all the different words they learned this year or the words we've been working on. So this is one of your handouts as well. Lastly, I want to share with you this awesome tool that I'm not going to do justice with, so check it out after this webinar. It's called the ALP for AAC Access, and what it lets you do is it lets you quantify qualitative information about how your AAC user is doing. So this is the back of the form, and you have 3 different stages of AAC use in 8 different phases. And in the descriptors, you can see it's all qualitative information. So at the beginning of the year, I might look at my child using AAC and rank them as a stage 1, phase 2. And I might write that in their present level of performance statement. But at the end of the year, when we come together and talk about their progress, I can show the parent how at the beginning of the year they were 1.2, but now they're stage 2, phase 5. And we can talk about all that progress they made, where typically this would just be kind of qualitative information. I've now been able to quantify it. And I just think this is a game changer, so check it out. Thank you so much. I know that was a lot of information. My contact information is here. I love to collaborate, so please reach out. I will be speaking with a colleague at ASHA this year. We'll be talking about effectively teaching AAC beyond the therapy session, so I'd love for you to join me. That would be awesome. My references are here, and I am going to turn it back over to Beth.
Thank you so much, Bree. That was amazing. That was so much good information. We really appreciate you being with us. We have a few questions. I know that it's 7 o'clock, so If you need to leave, we appreciate the fact that you stayed for the webinar. Remember, you have 15 days to send in your completed ASHA forms if you want to receive CEUs. You'll get a certificate of attendance in an hour. But I also want to give an opportunity for Bree to answer some questions that we have. So one of the questions that several people have asked Bree is, how do you choose the words that you target for your core words? You know, like they want to know if you had any specific reasons or ways that you decide what words you use.
Yeah, so I found that when I'm trying to get, because we're in the school setting and a lot of times I'm trying to get my teachers on board, you know, that has been a big thing, a hurdle that I try to overcome with some teachers, and just I want them invested in it. I always have teachers collaborate with me with what words we want to target. I know in Arkansas, we started giving the DLMs. And DLM worked with Project Core, and Project Core, if you don't know about it, check it out, Google it. It's a great resource. And there's all different evidence-based lists of words that are not only beneficial to students in the classroom, but also beneficial to students in real life. So I often look at those Project Core lists. So I had one up in my presentation that Gail has, and we try to pick words from there. And a lot of times we'll try to align those words with also students' DLM assessments as well, so that they are more effective when taking those assessments. But what makes me feel good about that is that it's not just core words that are important for that DLM test. Based on what Project Core has, it's words that are also important for the child for life. So Project Core is a place I go with my teachers. We look at those lists and we decide what words to target. And then we also select a couple fringe words that are important to that child specifically.
Okay, great. Here's another question. Regarding taking the device everywhere, middle school PE with a student who does not yet know the power of his device, and when they send it with the para, it just gets set aside. So this person's wondering if you have any suggestions for trying to help them use that during their middle school gym class.
Yeah, I find PE and recess are the two places that I often have to go and kind of problem solve with teams. I find that often I will suggest to my teams that as long as they bring it to PE and the child hands it to a responsible adult and they have that in place, where if the child knows where the device is because they're the one who handed it off to their para or their teacher or put it in a place. So it's not staying in the classroom during PE, but it's going with them to PE and they know exactly where it is. So if they needed the device, they could go to it. But while they're playing dodgeball, I don't necessarily expect them to have that device around them or be carrying that device because that would be a safety concern. But we try to put a system in place that's consistent so the child knows where their device is. And we use that same process during recess when my little elementary kiddos are climbing the jungle gym and we don't want them dropping their device or breaking it. They hand it off to a responsible adult and that process is consistent so they know where it is.
Okay. We have another question. Where would you start for a kid that's not motivated by anything? This person says they've tried tangible, sensory, and nothing seems to be of interest.
I have those students too, and they are super hard to, I don't know if you've sent a reinforcement assessment home and you've tried to talk to the parent about what they love. Those kids, they're hard, and I know they exist. I usually try to reach out to all those different communication partners and see if anybody's found anything they love. And we just try to brainstorm together. I have a child that I work with that's reinforced by our shoes. He likes playing with our shoelaces. So you'll see all his communication partners sometimes will be kind of taking off their shoes to try to get him communicating. So it's crazy. We've all gone through Walmart for those kiddos trying to match a sensory quality of something they like to other kids, to other objects. So those kids are hard. I'd reach out to other communication partners in their life and see if anybody else has any ideas, and just keep trying to reassess their reinforcements.
That's a good idea. Somebody else would like to know how much time you spend with the family during training, and then how much time like at school, or do you do anything at home?
Yeah, so my position's unique in that I don't carry a caseload. So I don't have students that I need to be, serving IEP minutes for. So I'm really lucky in that I have that role. I will often go above and beyond, though. I'll offer to come into a house after my contract time to try to support that child and support that family. But typically when we invite a family into the school to get trained, or if I'm going into a home to train a family, my training takes about 45 minutes. And then I'll offer to co-treat with those private therapists or go into the household for an hour or something and show the family what to do. So it kind of depends what the family needs. But I do have the flexibility to be able to go across environments during my school day when I'm on contract, because that's what my role is. So I'm really lucky in that. But my trainings take about 45 minutes, and then we do follow up. And a lot of our conversations through email, if I offer to go to them, it's typically an hour or so.
Okay. Another person says, is it important to start on low-tech AAC before transitioning a student to a high-tech device? And then they say the student they're thinking of is very tech-savvy and would really try to snatch every phone he sees.
All the research says there's no prerequisite to high-tech AAC. So there's nothing that says you have to start on low-tech. There's some red flags that often make me start with low-tech. You know, if I think the child's going to chuck the device, or if I need to teach them initiation, sometimes I'll decide for those reasons I need to start with low-tech. But there's no prerequisites. We always assume competence and try it, you know, give them the benefit of the doubt.
Okay. Just a couple more here, and then I want to be respectful of everybody's time because we've gone past, but we're just getting such good information here. I'd like to take advantage of you a few more minutes. Somebody says, do you have experience with modeling AAC in the midst of a behavioral problem to teach a replacement behavior, like ABA with AAC?
Yeah, so based on the research I've read and people I've collaborated with, when a child's completely escalated, you know, when they're in the middle of a fit, they're not in an arousal state to learn a new skill. So if a child's completely freaking out and throwing stuff and being aggressive, that's not a time that I get the device and try to teach them to tell me that they're mad or tell me something like that. We often try to jump in before the behavior escalates. So if we see some precursors to a behavior about to escalate, we'll try to jump in and show them how they can communicate their wants and needs in their device. And I work closely with our ABA therapist to figure out what we're going to do. But in the middle of a meltdown, I am never trying to teach a new skill or bring that device in to teach something like that, because I know the child's not hearing a word I'm saying. Afterwards, sometimes we'll debrief and talk about how they were mad and they could have told me that. But yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes I've found it's helpful to model, to teach words on someone else's behavior. So if something else is going on in the room, that might be a time when you take the student and say, oh, look, she's upset, or, you know,
right.
Something like that.
Yeah, video modeling is also really powerful, looking at different videos of kids and stuff. So we use that tool quite a bit.
Yeah. Okay, we just have a couple more here. One person says, is there some type of hierarchy of where to begin and a path to follow when beginning a student with eye gaze? You didn't really talk about eye gaze, so I'm not sure if you've done that.
I have. Eye gaze is a tricky one. There's a lot of different research articles and trainings out there on eye gaze, so I would try to follow some of those. There's not necessarily, I believe, any prerequisite skills. You know, there are some eye gaze programs where you can kind of see if the child is able to interact with the screen to just assess access. I would say that's something you need to do, you know, really assess access and make sure they're able to interact with the screen and there's nothing impairing that. And then once you assess access, there's different games out there you can play just to kind of get more information about if the child can access different areas of the screen and all that. But then you could put some communication software in front of them and try it. So the main thing I'd look at is make sure there's no access barriers when you're trying eye gaze with a student.
Okay, great. Okay, the last one we have here, ask under what circumstances would you use the hide mode, I guess hide or vocab builder, and how would you find that beneficial?
So I use it during strategic teaching opportunities. So if am I trying to teach a child a target word? So like maybe we talked about that kid being escalated and I wanted to teach them the word mad. You know, after that, when we're looking at a video and doing video modeling or something of emotions, I might use that hide mode so that the child just has access to emotions so I can teach them the different emotions without a missed hit. I've used hide mode also during like calendar time sometimes with our students so that they can learn where their different calendar words are and everything. So hide mode has a lot of different functions you can use it for. The thing I caution you with is using it to completely restrict a child's vocabulary, because we want to make sure we're giving kids a robust vocabulary system. So there are some emergent communicators that will decide we're going to start them with 50 target words. So we'll use hide mode to hide everything but those 50 target words, but then we'll quickly be unhiding words as we move along and they're making progress. So there's a lot of different ways you can use it. Just make sure you're not using it to restrict a child's vocabulary too much, because if we don't give them the words, they can't communicate. So.
Perfect. I think that's a great way to wrap it up. Bree, that was wonderful. We've had a lot of good comments in our chat section here about people finding it so helpful. So we really appreciate your willingness to share with us. I want to remind people that are asking about handouts. There is a place in the Go to Training window pane that shows that. If you don't see the handouts, they will be sent in an email also. When you close out of the webinar, you get a chance to take that little survey, which we hope that you will do. And then you will get an email with a certificate, and you will also get an email with the handouts and the ASHA paperwork. If you are looking for ASHA CEUs, again, follow the directions to fill that out as well. Thanks so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again here at our PRC Saltillo guest webinars. Everybody have a good night.